Alright, now we're going to talk about graphing a linear inequality. So we've graphed lines, and linear inequalities are pretty much exactly the same. We treat this inequality sign as an equal sign. And we graphed lines before. There was two ways. We could graph it either using the intercepts or by using the slope-intercept form. Most common, we use slope-intercept form, so that's what I would use here. And it actually helps us a lot when we need to shade. So it's not as good to use the intercepts here. So the easiest way is to go ahead and solve for y, and y is right here, so I've got to move the 3x by subtracting 3x to the other side. And that's going to give me 2y is greater than or equal to negative 3x plus 6. And then I divide by the 2 from everything. And I get y is greater than or equal to negative 3 halves x plus 3. Now, if this was an equal sign, I would just go ahead and graph this line by starting at 3, and then from 3 I would count down 3, the rise goes down 3, and then runs 2. And I would put 2 dots right there, and then I would connect the dots using a solid line. Well, now this time, I don't get to move quite that quickly. Yes, it is a solid line, it just so happens to be this time, but I actually have to pay attention now to this symbol right here. Because it says greater than or equal to, I actually will use the solid line. If it was just greater than with no sign underneath, I would use a dashed line. So it does make a big difference. This one here is solid. So the next thing I have to think about is whether or not y is greater or less than. If y is greater, like it is here, we have to shade a certain direction. If y is less than, like if I had something like y is less than up here at the top left, this would be shade below. Now, what we're kind of thinking about is whether or not I put it in terms of water. Now lines, the way it looks here, you can see it as the slope of a house. Like if you drew the house, this would be your house. Okay? And you have two places that rain can be. Let me kind of clear this up a little bit. So right here and here was our line, okay, and then here was our house if we went ahead and drew the house there. Okay, there's two places that water could be. Either water is going to fall from the sky, okay, or we have water coming up from above, a flood. Okay, so the y is greater than or equal to negative 3 halves x plus 3. Is what tells us whether or not we've got a rain or a flood. If y is greater than, it means it's coming from the sky. If y is less than, it means it's coming from the ground. Okay, so visualizing our house there and our line continuing on, it's raining. In other words, I shade on top. So the actual graph doesn't include this other little house part, is just the line with the shading on top. So here's another example. This one is less than, and it's not equal to, so we're going to get a dashed line. Okay, but we actually have to be careful as we're solving because it's not going to just stay less than. So first thing I want to do is subtract my x, and I get negative 3y is less than negative x plus 4. Okay, and I finish by dividing by negative 3, but I got to be careful because when I divide by a negative with inequalities, the sign actually flips. So I get y is greater than positive 1/3 x minus 4/3. So I begin at negative 4/3, so I go down 1 1/3, and from there I rise 1, run 3. So rise 1, run 1, 2, 3. And I connect those dots, but this time I connect them with a dashed line rather than a solid line. Now again, because this doesn't have an equal line underneath, is why I'm drawing a dashed line. Now, because y is greater than, again, we shade above because it's like rain rather than a flood. So this would be the correct graph for this particular problem. So now let me do it again as if there was one that's going to be on shading below. So if I had negative x plus 3y is less than 15, I go ahead and solve. I'd add the x and I get negative 3y positive 3y is less than x plus 15. And then I divide by 3, and I would get y is less than 1/3 x plus 5. So if I was to graph, I would start at 5, put a dot, and then I would go down 1, right 3, have my second dot, and this one again it would be a dashed line instead of solid, so I would draw in my dashed line, and this time it's flooding because y is below. Below means that you shade below, like it's a flood, so you shade below the line.